High stakes, heart-pounding moments, pressure like you wouldn't believe, almost flops, and moments that I will always remember. This is the Nick Solomon Show, the Sports Chatter Podcast. Let's get it started.
Spence to scores! Watford for the win! You can't make this stuff up, folks. God, that old young guy should really take back and look at what this man has done.
Hey, welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Nick Solomon Show, the Sports Chatter Podcast. This is episode 14, and it's a sort of part two of what really wasn't at the beginning considered a two-part episode or episodes. But basically, this is sort of part two of last week's episode. If you didn't have a chance to watch episode 13, please do. Link is in the bottom of the description. I advise you to watch that episode before you watch this one. But if you have watched episode 13, fantastic. We'll roll right into episode 14. The first thing that you guys might have already noticed, wherever you are at watching this, it's still daylight by the time I'm recording this. Daylight savings hit in between my last podcast and this one, and I am all here for it. It's lighter later out. I love it, because who doesn't like the sunshine? And the sun is going to shine on one of these teams. Who are these teams? Well, it's one of the 64 teams that are in March Madness. That is it, guys. March Madness is officially here. The first games kick off tomorrow evening. There's so many games, they can't all happen in the evening because some of them are tipping off at noon. The field is set. Let me give you guys a little sneak peek on sort of who is in what regions and how many conferences have the most bids. So right off the bat, the Big 12 is sending 8 teams. They have 8 teams in the NCAA tournament. Same thing with the SEC. They also are sending 8 teams. Big 10 and the Mountain West have 6 teams. The ACC with 5, Pac-12 with 4, Big East with 3, and the American, A-10, and West Coast Conference each have 2 apiece. And then the remaining conferences fill out the remaining automatic bids. The first thing that's kind of striking to this is Mountain West, 6 bids, and the Big East, only 3? That's probably the biggest sort of shocker looking at the numbers here, is probably that, looking right at that. But who are our number 1 seeds? Well, we'll start with the number 1 overall seed, and that is the UConn Huskies. They finished the regular season 31-3 and have pretty much been the most dominant and consistent team throughout the whole entire year. And they are headlining the East bracket region. Next, we have the South bracket, and that is headlined by Houston with a 30-4 record. And then out of the West region is University of North Carolina Tar Heels with a 27-7 record. And then lastly, out of the Midwest, we have Purdue with a 29-4 record. Purdue or Purdue. Usually are going to go by Purdue. I'm not going to hold back here. They're most likely going to get bounced in the Sweet 16, just like they normally do the past few years. I digress. We move on. So which of these regions, the East, South, Midwest, and West, do I think have the easiest and toughest way there as far as the number 1 seeds are concerned? I mean, looking at some of the regions here, I'd first have to say North Carolina out of the West region probably has the easiest way there. I mean, looking at who all is in their side of the bracket, I mean, you'd have to say Arizona and St. Mary's as maybe the toughest other teams in that bracket. Arizona being the 2 seed and St. Mary's as a 5 seed. Nobody else really from that region makes me worried if I'm North Carolina. So if I'm North Carolina, I'm only looking out for two teams. Yeah, 2 teams coming out of that bracket. So North Carolina definitely has the easiest road to the Final Four. Now, who has, on the opposite end of that, the toughest road to the Final Four out of the 3 remaining 1 seeds? I'd have to go with UConn. I mean, they have Auburn, Illinois, Iowa State, San Diego State. All of those are tough matchups. Even Washington State out of the Pac-12. Yeah, that to me is the hardest one. Houston was close. I mean, they have Duke, Kentucky, and Marquette in Houston's side of the bracket. So a lot of blue bloods, in the South region, but it's the East. I mean, San Diego State as a 5 seed, Illinois as a 3 seed, Iowa State as the 2 seed. Yeah, it's tough. And even Staples, I've kind of been there just the past couple years. Like Yale out of the Ivy League, they're sitting there at the 13th seed. You have Drake that's been to the dance a few times as a 10th seed. If there was a sleeper team from this bracket, I mean, Florida Atlantic, they shocked the world last year and making it to the Final Four. They're the 8th seed. So yeah, that to me is the toughest bracket would be the East seed. So what I wanted to do was sort of gather a mailbag sort of perspective. So I sent out a huge survey for a lot of people to fill out, just who their consensus top Final Four would be from each bracket. And the data isn't as far-fetched as what the national media also has predicted to make it to the Final Four out of each bracket. So who is most likely to reach the Final Four? Well, it looks like the number 1 seed UConn, number 1 seed Houston, number 1 seed Purdue, and the number 2 seed Arizona are more likely to make it out of their bracket from this survey that I put out there. But followed shortly by North Carolina, Tennessee, Auburn, and Kentucky. Also had this sort of the second best chances of the 4 regions to make it to the Final Four. So, what is my Final Four? My Final Four is, out of the East region, I have number 1 seed UConn Huskies. Out of the South region, I have the number 1 seed Houston Cougars. From the Midwest region, I have the number 7 seed Texas Longhorns. And out of the West region, I have the number 2 seed Arizona Wildcats. Now, most of mine, a lot of people would agree on as far as my Final Four predictions, except Texas. That's right. I have a 7th seed Texas advancing all the way to the Final Four. Now, the last time, and it's only happened, I think, 6 times in the NCAA men's basketball history, has any team higher than, I believe, since 2000, a seed higher than 3 hasn't won. UConn was the first team last year as a 4 seed to win in a very, very long time. Since no one higher than 3, I guess, has won since UConn did it last year, since 1985 when an 8th seeded Villanova won. So it's always usually going to be a top 3 seed at the very end. So having 7th seed Texas isn't an abnormality getting them to the Final Four. That's any prediction. I don't have them winning. Who do I have winning? Well, first, I'll set the matchup. It would be UConn versus Arizona in the Final Four, and it would be Houston versus Texas in the Final Four for my bracket. So, in a matchup between UConn and Arizona, who do I have winning? I have Connecticut winning. Between Houston and Texas, who do I have winning? It's sort of the battle of the state of Texas. I have Houston winning that one. So I have Houston versus UConn. Battle of two number ones. I'm not really sure when the last time two number one seeds faced each other in the Final Four. It may be. It could have been North Carolina and Gonzaga in 2017 or 2016 might have been the last time. Maybe 2013 when Louisville beat. I can't even remember who Louisville beat. It was Michigan. That could have been another year where I think 2 1 seeds have played each other in the championship game. It's not that often that we get 2 1 seeds to play in the Final Four. Having said that, in the championship game. Having said that, I have Houston beating UConn, Houston winning the national championship. To me, what I've watched and what I've read, Houston has the best defense in the entire tournament. They've been there, they've done that. They're led by Calvin Sampson, former IU coach, and he has led that program to very big heights since he has been there. And they've been in the thick of things the past few NCAA March Madnesses. But this year they get it done. This year they take care of business. And they were ranked as the number one team for a little bit this year as well. Again, they finished with the overall record of 30-4. Their 4 losses weren't all terrible. The only real bad loss on Houston's resume is the Big 12 title game that they lost to Iowa State. And they got their asses whooped in the Big 12 title game. I'm going to put that as an abnormality. I don't think that is going to happen again. Now, the road there, they really only, because they have Duke and Kentucky and Marquette in their bracket, they wouldn't face Duke until the Sweet 16, and they wouldn't face Marquette or Kentucky until the Elite 8. So I don't really see tough obstacles. Those are tough teams, but I don't see too many tough obstacles on Houston's way to getting there. And same thing with UConn. Even though, UConn has a tougher road there because they have the toughest bracket. They could essentially play Florida Atlantic in the next round if both of these teams advance. And then if they win that, there's a good chance that they would play Auburn. And if they win that, there's a good chance that they would play Iowa State that they would play Iowa State or Illinois to try and advance to the Final Four. So it's not an easy road for UConn. It's not an easy road for Houston, but I believe both those teams get done. Both those teams meet each other, and Houston comes out on top. And this would be Houston's first win since I think... Did they win when they had Phi Slamma Jamma in 84 or 85? Maybe that was the one Villanova won, was over Houston. I believe that was the one with Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, I think are the 2 main stars I can think of out of Houston. I think it was 85 or 84. It was one of those 2. But I have Houston cutting down the Nets. Not to turn away from it, because it's also very important, I also want to highlight that not only the men's March Madness basketball going on, but also the women's. It's happening at the same time. So let's shed some light on our ladies, as they should be. So I'm just going to cut down to it. Who do I have winning the women's national championship in basketball? I have South Carolina. South Carolina versus Iowa, and what would be a highly viewed matchup if that were to happen. Iowa isn't just a one-woman show. It's not just the Caitlin Clark show, but they're pretty much run through Caitlin Clark. South Carolina is just dominant, absolutely dominant. 32-0. That's all you have to say. They're 32-0. And they have the best starting five in the entire field. Now, they will be missing, I believe, their center, Cardosa, for this first game, stemming back to their SEC title game when she got ejected at the end of the game. So she's more than likely out for this first-round matchup, but it is versus a 16 seed. I think they will be fine without her. What's tough is that IU's women's basketball team is in the same bracket as South Carolina. IU did great. They were a 1 seed last year, and they got bounced out in the Sweet 16, which wasn't great. In the round of 32 last year. Weird scenario last year, okay? IU women's basketball was the number 1 seed, and I forget what region last year. I think they were number 2 overall team, but number 1 in their region. IU men's basketball had a top 10 seed. I can't exactly remember off the top of my head what their ranking was. Both of them won their first round games. Okay, both of them advanced to the round of 32. IU men's basketball played Miami. IU women's basketball played Miami. It was the craziest sort of just dumb luck you could sort of get, and both of them lost to Miami. I believe for IU's women's standpoint, it was the first time like a 1 seed had lost in the round of 32 in a long time, I think. Something along the lines of that. And it was, both of them kind of pretty much got handled. And both of them were the higher seeds going into the matchup, so it's unfortunate. That was just a weird sort of circumstance that happened a year ago. But this year, IU women's basketball had another really good year. They ended up being the 4th seed. Unfortunately, though, they are playing in the same region as South Carolina. Also in their bracket is Notre Dame, which had a really strong year. And Nebraska as well as North Carolina are in IU women's basketball's bracket. It is... looking at their bracket right now, you got 3 Big Ten teams in theirs with Indiana, Michigan State, and Nebraska all in the same region. So that's interesting. But the only break is Indiana wouldn't have to face South Carolina until the Sweet 16. Having said that, I still unfortunately see IU losing to South Carolina. I wish they could go further. But that's such a tough break for anyone. Iowa has the toughest, absolutely just murder's row to try and advance to the Final Four out of their region. So get this. This is what Iowa women's basketball have in their region. So the number 2 seed is UCLA. The number 3 seed is LSU, and that's the same opponent as last year's championship game. You have a very strong Colorado team at 5. And who am I missing? That's really good. You have Louisville, too. Yeah. Iowa's got a tough road to the Final Four. the women's side. They could probably cruise to the Sweet 16, but Sweet 16, depending on who they play against, it could easily be Colorado, it could be Kansas State, but at least with UCLA or even UNLV or LSU, they wouldn't have to play them until the Elite Eight. But that is tough. That is tough. Well, guys, this was episode 14. I hope you guys are looking forward to watching all of these basketball games that are going to take place over the next 2.5 weeks. It's a lot to consume, but it's great entertainment, and I just cannot wait to see what Cinderella story is going to get written this year. I was looking to see who has an outsider's chance. Who could this year's Cinderella be? Well, I have 3 teams that I've written down as my Cinderella teams for this year. One of which is from the South region, the 12th seeded James Madison Dukes. They opened up the year beating Michigan State in East Lansing. And they rode that high the entire year. They finished with an impressive 31-3 record. I believe that is the best record in the tournament overall, as I'm looking at all the other teams other than UConn, which has the same exact record, 31-3. I don't see another team that has that mark. Actually, I don't see another team that even has 30 wins. Nope. McNeese is 30-3. McNeese. Is it either McNeese or McNeese? I think it's McNeese. That actually rolls off the tongue a little bit better. I think it's McNeese. They have a 30-3 record, but nobody else has 30 wins other than Houston as well. But again, UConn and James Madison have the best overall records at 31-3. So James Madison is one of my sleeper picks that could cause some noise. The other one is you get the right matchup. Sanford, the 13th seed out of the Midwest region. Now they play Kansas. But Kansas is missing a couple players. I have Kansas winning that game, but Sanford would be my other sleeper pick. If I had a third sleeper pick, I don't know if you can consider this a sleeper pick just because of how high of a seed that they are, but I'm going to pick St. Mary's out of the West region. They're a 5th seed. They've been there the past 3 years. They have an experienced team. They are very guard-led, but they're out of a small conference, and they're not a Power 5 team. So that is why I'm going to go with James Madison, Sanford, and St. Mary's as my sleeper picks. What are your guys' sleeper picks? What are your guys' Final Four? Who's in your championship? And what team do you have cutting down the nets? Please drop your answers down in the comments below, and we'll actually have our answers by the time my next podcast comes out. Take care, guys. I'll see you.